Part two. I don't have the notes up for part two. Oh God.
Part two.
Oh God. Part two. Hey.
Nice.
I like the end.
Yeah.
I like this setup of notes. I think it's very fun.
It's good. I gave up partway through doing notes today.
That's fair. That's more than fair.
I did, however, get us a second quote.
Well, there you go.
Terror is the desire to save yourself, but horror is rooted in sympathy.
It's by Joe Hill, who is Stephen King's son.
Yeah, I thought that would be a fun thing to do with the quotes.
That's cute.
Yeah.
That's cute.
Like a little baby horror.
Little baby horror. Yeah.
He's like twice my age. Little baby horror, right?
Little baby horror. I'm using this voice, and Harley's like, should I be paying attention right now? That's the voice you use when you talk to me sometimes. I'm a doggo. Harley, lay back down. It's good. Okay.
Alright.
Yeah, so this is the advice portion.
Yes.
Kat, you know the most about this because this is literally your life.
This is literally my job.
This is literally your job.
So
people are always so impressed when I tell them that you're like a horror person.
Nice.
Like I'm always like, yeah, that's friends like freelance horror person. They're like, that's so cool, and I'm like, I know, she's so cool.
I'm cool, guys.
Cool. You have to say it like that though.
Oh, I do.
You're not cool.
All the
You're
time.
cool.
I whisper it to myself in the mirror before bed. I'm a real good boy.
You're a real good boy. Except I'm the good boy. Harley is a good boy.
Real Good Boy is a horror story that I pitched earlier today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's gonna be a story for sure. It has the potential of actually being very upsetting.
It might be.
But also, you made it when we were, like, driving in the car, and very obviously we're both fucking exhausted.
It might be a real Silence of the Lambs.
No! Here we
it's,
go
like,
again.
Funny, and then it's not funny at all.
No, not again. I can't handle that again.
But yeah, horror advice. Part 1 is just general advice. And the biggest thing, consume horror fiction.
Mm-hmm.
I, like, get more horror content. Because I'd say it's one of those things, you know, you can get inspiration in a genre by consuming that genre very specifically, but I think horror is a very intimate example of that.
Mm-hmm.
Because as opposed to, you know, you see some cool fantasy thing and you're like, I like that, but what if it were like this? You know, when you see horror, it's like, this is, you know, you're like trying to figure out what's going on and you are trying to piece it together, and you see something and you're like, this would be really terrifying, and then like half the time it ends up being something else. So it's a really good thing to remember what you think it was and follow that path.
Right.
You know?
A lot of horror is about interpretation,
Mm-hmm.
because everyone is scared by different things. I don't know what Kat's scared by besides commitment. I'm scared of lots of things, but not commitment.
Mm-hmm.
So we have different views on, like, so if we're both...
So it's like, here's a fun thing.
Mm-hmm.
If we were going to look, I did a poll one year about this. If you are going to look at, like, a zombie bride, are you more afraid of the fact that she's a zombie or a bride?
See, I'd be more scared that she's a zombie.
Whereas I'd be afraid of the, you know, marital symbols. Which is a poll. I went as a zombie bride one year. I did polls while I was trick-or-treating. I was multitasking.
Corpse Bride! We're watching Corpse Bride now.
Give me a listen. I kind of know the words to Corpse Bride. Don't fear. I don't. I lied.
Anyway, that skeleton was Kat's father. And that's why we know about... Corpse Bride is
yeah, but consume a lot of
why
horror
didn't we
fiction.
put that on the family horror?
Oh, because I thought about it, but we'd already talked about Nightmare Before Christmas.
We should talk about Corpse Bride.
We should have.
Also.
It's also good.
Anyway, you were saying. I got upset.
Consume horror fiction. That's a really good way to get ideas. It's a good way to learn the genre. In particular, read and write or draw horror fiction. Create in the genre, because it's, I would say, the most difficult genre to write or do content for. Scaring people is hard because it's something that's so subjective.
Right.
And I would say that, like, the best thing that you can do is practice.
So you sort of gotta keep at it, and you gotta see what it is about your style that frightens people.
Yeah.
Because the more you do, the more you're gonna notice themes that you gravitate towards. Like when I'm doing like spooky stuff, I do a lot of like drippy black messes. Like I do a lot of very inky stuff without a lot of control over my hands. And that's sort of my thing that I gravitate towards. That seems to have a general sense of upsetting people.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So yeah, just get into doing it. It's a very daunting task to be like, I want to scare my audience, but it gets easier the more you do it. And as for consuming more horror content, there's so much horror fiction that you can read. There are so many horror movies that you can stream. There's so much free art that you can go look at. So just work that into your daily life. Follow some horror people on social media if you feel like you're not coming across enough stuff naturally.
Mr. Creepypasta exists.
Yeah, and that's something, if you work in a visual medium and you don't have to be like editing or focusing on words or whatever, I definitely would recommend finding a horror narrator or two that you like. Mr. Creepypasta is a good one. Creeps McPasta, Creepypasta Jr., Dr. Creepin', Maple Pasta. There are a lot of options.
There are so many options.
All men. Miss Shadow Lovely.
There you go.
Yep. Lady White Rabbit is really good. Eden reads. I feel better.
There you go. I was like, where are your ladies at? I know you have ladies there.
I am guilty of listening to more male narrators than female narrators, and it's I hope that it's not a sexism thing. It's just I'm friends with a lot of male creepypasta narrators.
Right.
So they're kind of my go-tos. But yeah, so it's just, that's something that you can do. And if you want to do more reading, you can go to people's personal websites. There are a bunch of horror creators just posting fiction, like really good quality horror fiction on Tumblr. Creepypasta.com has some really great things. Reddit No Sleep is the thing that exists.
Unsettling stories, as we've mentioned several times.
Yeah. You can go to, there's a public domain website where you can just read. You can download PDFs for anything that's in the public domain. Edgar Allan Poe's collection just got added this year.
Ooh, spooky.
So you can read, like, horror classics for free. And you should. H.P. Lovecraft has been there for a while, also. So there's a ton of horror content that you can be consuming. If you're looking into more paid content, if you want to, like, go out and get stuff, to learn more about the genre and to experience, like, the roots of the genre we've already mentioned, Stephen King is really good. Robert Bloch is very good. Jack Ketchum, fantastic horror writers. In the more contemporary side of that, we also have Joe Hill. We've got Clive Barker. Neil Gaiman is a good one because he, like, borders on horror. So if you're trying to ease yourself in to the genre, he does stuff that's spooky without being gory.
Without being absolutely terrifying.
So that's, and, if you scare easy and are trying to learn, there are ways to ease yourself in. Goosebumps.
Like,
scary stories to tell in the dark.
Oh, I hate that cover image.
That's another thing. If you're looking to consume more horror art, I would go look at Gamble's work. He illustrated Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, and it's terrifying.
That fucking haunting cover picture. I hate it.
It's something. It's scary.
It definitely is something.
Traumatized an entire generation of children.
Yeah. Kat would pull out that book and I would have to look away until she opened it. That was my worst fear, was finding it in the library by myself. Alone.
Also, for more contemporary horror art, Trevor Henderson, or Slimy Swamp Ghost, if you want to check him out. Very good. Horror content is just good. Get more of it in there. If you're looking for places to stream, pretty much any streaming service that you subscribe to is going to have a horror section that you can just go look at. I'll maybe do a self-promotion link here, because I frequently do like deep dives and top lists of the best things streaming from what. And if you're looking to get into the classics, that's a really good way. There are also places like Fright Picks,
Crypt TV,
Tubi TV.
Lots of them.
Yeah.
Lots of free ones that you don't have to really subscribe to.
And again, if you're looking for classics or anything that's royalty free, there is a really good selection of classic horror movies that you can watch from YouTube.
Right.
You can actually, like one of the first horror movies ever, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, you can watch on YouTube.
Ooh.
So, yeah, more horror content. And then draw, photograph creepy places, Get in the habit
Photograph
of doing it.
a dog toy that your dog ripped the face off of.
Yeah.
Looking at you, Harley. He's a good boy. He accidentally made a horror.
Good.
But yeah.
It's another fun thing that I'm writing. Yay.
Yay.
So, my next piece of advice would be to get scared. And it ties into, if you can get scared from horror content, do that.
Right.
If you're, like, trying to ease yourself in, a good way to get scared would be to not do that. Find something that you think might be a little bit
upsetting but not
to you, and, like, don't push yourself too far, but I would recommend playing horror games, because that tends to be a little bit more of a frightening experience overall, just because of the interactive quality.
Right, especially if you're like playing in a dark room with headphones on.
Yeah.
Because
don't feel quite ready to take on like a full-on like first-person horror game. There are things like the uncle that worked for Nintendo,
right?
My father's long legs, like interactive horror things.
Right, things that aren't necessarily full on. One of the things I find is sometimes the visual elements are too upsetting for me. So stuff like my uncle who worked for Nintendo or any of those text-based horror games are real good.
Yeah.
To sort of ease in with.
Or if you have something that you're like afraid of, it's something that we talked about a little bit for being brave, where you feel really good when you conquer fears, but there's also just something very primal about the feeling of being scared.
Right.
If you can get scared, that's exactly the kind of mindset that you want to be in when you're doing horror content. So right. Yeah, do that. Haunted house experiences are a really good one.
We were talking about those today.
We were. I just watched
maybe
a
a little
about it.
More extreme than...
Yeah. Yeah, I was talking about some of the extreme ones, because those are the ones that I get all excited about. But there are haunted house attractions just, for just about any kind of scare range.
Right.
Or, like, it doesn't even have to be that. You put yourself in, like, a spooky environment.
Right.
If you're at a hotel, go get ice in the middle of the night. Go to the vending machines in a hotel. It's
Get
spooky.
stuck in the elevator.
Yeah.
Go to the 5th floor.
Find scratches in the elevator. Let the elevator take you to a new floor. You're a real good boy.
Well, you're mixing your weird, surreal horror things. One of which doesn't exist.
Like, walk at night.
Yeah. Don't turn your brights on while you're driving.
Yeah.
Like, have your headlights on, obviously. Duh.
Or don't.
No.
Come back.
But don't turn your brights on.
As a dog toy?
You are really pushing this story that you have not written yet.
Oh, I'll have written it by the time this posts.
Oh, no.
It'll be famous.
Will it?
It'll be my #1 rated story.
Oh, it's gonna beat Silence of the Lambs.
By a long shot. Because I'm a real good boy. But yeah, those are all things that you can do. Pick up a spider.
Pick up a bug.
Yeah. What are things that people are afraid of?
I don't know.
Commit to something.
Oh, cat. Oh, no, cat.
Go in a skyscraper.
Get it
I thought you were gonna say get a tattoo.
No.
No?
No, I wasn't
Okay.
going to say that.
But yeah, it's just something that those experiences, they stick with you.
Do a ritual
They're
pasta.
different.
Nothing will go wrong with that one.
Oh yeah, do a ritual pasta. That's fine.
You won't end up with a ghost in your bathroom that won't leave.
That
messes with the circuit breaker in your house.
We just got it fixed because I was having so many problems with it. Less than a year ago, we just got it fixed. What was it, in April? We finally got it fixed. It's starting to act up again.
Oh my god.
And it's the one from that bathroom. Be careful with ritual pastas.
Yeah.
If you, in all seriousness though, if you're looking for a ritual pasta to try out, I would maybe recommend 11 Miles, because it is not. It's one of those things where you read a lot more instructions than you'll ever end up needing, but the experience of going out, driving alone at night, just having read that is kind of spooky on its own.
Right.
So it checks out. Yeah. So scary things are good.
They are. They'll scare you, in theory, if they're good.
Yeah. I'm trying to think, are there any other scary experiences you'd recommend?
No, I don't like to be scared. I'm a soft boy.
Alan says he doesn't like to be scared, but he's, I think, dragged me to more haunted attractions than I've dragged him to.
Whoops. I do that sometimes. I'm a hypocrite of myself.
It's because there's a part of everyone that likes being scared.
Right.
Except for the guy that runs the most extreme haunted house attraction.
I don't know what's up with that guy.
He doesn't like being
so
scared.
Funny.
He's afraid of snails.
That's so funny.
We need to see if we can find just that snail clip for you. It's hilarious.
Oh my god. I'm sure we can. I'm sure it's there somewhere.
But yeah.
Is everyone making noise during the podcast today?
Yes.
Is that what it is? Is that what it is, Harley? I'm just waiting for Double to start yelling.
And also, use real experience. And this doesn't have to be, it's one of those things we talk about all the time where you can draw inspiration from just about anything. But if there's something that's ever unsettled you or just seemed out of place, that's a really good detail to just throw in,
Right, it's just something that...
Or even to build a story around.
Like lamps?
Like lamps. Like if the lamp is just disproportionately large for your hotel room, or the elevator takes you to the wrong floor. Or, there's this is probably one of the only horror art stories that I have, because I don't do a lot of horror art. But I was working on some of the concept art for one of my pieces, and I made sure I covered... We were in this hotel, and the power outlet was covered up with an extra thing of wallpaper that matched the wallpaper under it, and it just, it really creeped me out.
That's so weird.
And
Why?
I incorporated that later, and it was just like a very weird, specific detail, but I had remembered that it creeped me out when I stayed at that hotel.
So maybe.
So maybe it'll creep someone
other
else
people.
out. You never know.
You never know what people think about power outlets.
I stayed at this one hotel. This is off topic, but I stayed at this really freaky hotel.
Oh, yeah.
It was like a comfort inn, I feel like, because it was like a chain that I had been at before, and usually they're fine. But I stayed at this one, and the shower tile was so freaky because it came out at like a slight curve, like tiles do.
Right.
But it was made out of like a clear acrylic, and just the way that the tiles under were shadowed, it made it look like they were holes that were set into the wall.
Oh, that's not good. I don't like that.
Hi, Harley.
I don't like that at all. Stop harassing the person who's allergic to you. You boy! Hey. Can you sit down? Good boy.
And then if you do have something if you have a traumatic event in your life, you know, it might be too personal to open up about, but on the other side of that, it might be cathartic.
Right. You sort of...
And
just try it out.
The individual knows themselves better than, you know, so don't traumatize yourself trying to traumatize other people.
Right, because then that's not healthy. That's not being scared for fun. That's being bad. You don't want to do that to yourself. There's this weird idea that, like, artists and writers and everything have to be, like, tortured in order to make good work.
Mm-hmm.
Don't torture yourself.
Yeah.
That's not good. You deserve better than that. Take care of yourself.
But if you can sign up for the McCamey Manor, do it.
Hold on, cat. Hold on. Stop trying to get people to get into haunted houses that you haven't been to.
Recreational torture.
That's a kink.
That is a kink.
It's true. Moving on.
That should be the... No, in all seriousness, that should be the tagline for McCamey Manor.
That's a kink?
That's a kink.
I mean, you're not wrong.
And the last general piece of advice, have good representation. One of the biggest downfalls of the horror genre kind of comes in at the representation, because a lot of horror tropes are sexist.
Yeah.
A lot of horror subgenres that try to subvert those horror tropes ended up being pretty sexist. That's why there's a, like, sexploitation genre, which we didn't really talk about a lot.
Yeah, I think I'm good not talking about sexploitation.
Yeah, that is definitely a thing that exists. And there's a lot of ableism is, like, a really big problem in the horror community.
What's it? I saw, I was watching a comic book list, and it was like, one of the things was like, it was like, the worst things, like, the Joker has done, and it was like, all of the Killing Joke was on there, and wow, so much ableism.
Yeah.
So much. God, it's just,
yeah.
Bad.
And there's like a really, yeah.
Yep. I feel like it happens in a lot of, like, when it comes to, like, freak show things, it's a dangerous game to play. It's, dare I say, bad.
Yeah. And there's a fine line. I think that's something that modern horror is... I'm not going to say that it's not flawed, but there are steps being taken in the right direction. I think a good example of it would be, like, the difference between Psycho and Bates Motel, where it's like, Psycho is not very correct by today's standards,
right?
Despite being, you know, it's very timeless in the sense that it's a staple of the horror genre, but it was flawed in its execution. It's something that
I would say we couldn't really get away with today, but there's that literal shot-for-shot remake.
Yeah, they definitely did that still.
That's a thing that happened. But Bates Motel gets more into, instead of seeing just all of the victims of Norman Bates, we get to see the pattern of abuse, and we get to see that it's because his problems went untreated.
Right.
We get to see him as the victim also, you know.
Right.
And it's something to do. It's something you have to be really careful about. I think when you have any kind of killer in particular who has a mental disorder, it's okay to villainize someone without villainizing the entire group of people.
Right. It's one of those big things. Schizophrenia is one of those real bad things that gets used a lot in the horror genre.
Yeah.
We could also talk about the entire incident regarding Split, which is offensive in name alone.
Yeah.
But it's like, because the thing is, you should never villainize the mental disorder.
Yeah.
Because, like, that's really not how it is.
Yeah.
Like, but when the thing is, because it's used so much, that's how people have come to perceive how it actually is, and it's bad.
And
really.
it's also something you need to be really careful about, because it's not like with Split, it's not always just about how you handle something on a case-by-case basis. Sometimes it gets to the point where just perpetuating stereotypes can be harmful.
Right. I think it's one of those things where a lot of people just I think one of the things, if a group of people is offended by the representation in a thing, maybe you should listen to them.
Yeah.
On that. Maybe that is something that should be, listened to.
Remind me to cycle back around to that for controversy.
I will.
The last point that I want to have on for have good representation also is, don't, it's hard because, especially in, short fiction, there are a lot of instances where it doesn't make a lot of sense to specify physical characteristics.
Right.
For every character when you won't be working with them for a long period of time, or when they're, that's not the focus of the story. But, especially if you're working with longer stuff, or if you're doing any kind of visual media, maybe don't just all have white people.
Right.
And if you only have a few people of color, maybe don't kill them off first.
Right. Maybe, I don't know, treat them with the same respect you would treat any other character.
Yeah.
Crazy idea here, but, please.
It's nice.
Yeah.
It's a good thing. Maybe
don't be an asshole. I know this is a wild idea, but, if you're gonna be an asshole, maybe fuck off.
So, part 2. We're gonna talk about tropes.
Yes.
TV Tropes has a really comprehensive list of horror tropes for just about every sub genre of horror.
Oh, no.
But we're not gonna run through all of those. If you're interested in them, definitely go to that list. I guess comment if you're interested in tropes for a specific subgenre, because if you want it broken up that way, it would probably be easier for me just to answer those questions.
That's true. You have a lot of knowledge.
Than it would be to go through the entire TV tropes list, because there are hundreds of things on there. But
though some people do enjoy just scrolling through TV tropes.
That's
I'm one of them.
Just fun sometimes. But just for general things, abandoned place.
Yep,
a hospital, particularly old mental hospitals.
Oh, back to controversy.
Amusement parks are a big one.
I feel
parking lots also.
Yeah. I feel like this isn't exactly a horror thing. Scooby-Doo does a lot of abandoned places.
Oh yeah.
If you want a list abandoned places, like, just go, like, watch an episode of Scooby-Doo, and they will be in an abandoned place.
We didn't talk about Courage for kids horror.
Oh, God, I love Courage. Though, we already talked about Courage so much. But we love Courage.
We do.
The Middle of Nowhere.
Yeah. That's what reminded me.
There you go. Farmhouses.
Oh, yeah, that's a pretty big one.
Listen, you can abandon apartment buildings. Honestly, just about everywhere.
Yeah.
It can't, anywhere that could have people, you could make it abandoned.
Exactly.
It's that easy.
Having no cell phone coverage. This sort of replaced the trope of having the lines cut before that.
Right.
And then cell phones came along to fix that plot hole, and so then we
no
developed
coverage.
the trope of no cell coverage. Or, and one of my favorite little fun tidbits on here, You're Next, they went through that whole no cell phone coverage trope.
Oh, yeah.
But the one of the killers had actually, like, interfered with the signal.
Oh, it, like, jammed it?
Yeah.
I like that.
And it was, like, it was a small thing, but it was nice.
And so, Cabin in the Woods does it also. Like,
Yeah.
they can jam the cell phone signal.
Right.
Once they enter the area.
Which is good.
It's good.
Sexual revenge is a big one.
Ooh, this goes a lot in the hand in hand with there's a lot of sexploitation in horror movies. So there's sort of a whole genre for the opposite of that, is getting revenge for it.
Which often just kind of turns out to be more of the same thing under a different lens. A really good example of that would be the original I Spit on Your Grave. And a really good example of a story, of a sexual revenge story that really is just a revenge story, the remake, I Spit on Your Grave 3.
Huh.
Because that was different, for sure.
What about Teeth, though?
How
do you feel about that dick mutilation?
Nice. Teeth had just the right amount of dick mutilation, honestly. Good. Yeah. American Mary. Good.
There's a lot of them.
There are a lot of them. And it's a really dicey genre, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
But the ones that are good usually end up being pretty good.
The thing is, it has to be done well, otherwise it should not be done.
Right. And we have Wes Craven to thank for that, because of The Last House on the Left.
Ooh.
Is a thing that happened.
That's true.
That one is really different, though. It's weird, because it sort of, like, kicked off the craze.
Uh-huh.
But the victim wasn't the one who got revenge on anyone. It was her parents. Found out that their daughter had been, like, violently murdered, and so they just violently murder people also. So that was interesting. Anyway.
Weird.
Also has a remake.
Oh.
So yeah, a Vengeful Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
On the other side of that,
that's like any of the paranormal
pretty much
ghost stories almost entirely are vengeful. They're vengeful. I kind of do just want to see a movie with a Peeves type poltergeist
with like a friendly ghost,
like Casper. Horror.
Family horror?
No, regular horror. Harley's scared.
When I was a kid, I had like a little kid, little teeny tiny baby cat. I had a crush on there was a live action Casper movie where Casper came back as a human for like a dance or whatever. I don't know. But I had a crush on the kid that played Casper.
Aww.
And then the next movie that I saw him in was several years after that. He was in Final Destination.
That's weird.
It was really weird. I also had a crush on him in Final Destination. But the age difference was a lot creepier at that point for me.
A little bit.
No one should have been letting me watch Final Destination. And I didn't recognize him. for like the longest time.
Then all of a sudden you're like, wait.
And now I'm not sure why I had a crush on him, honestly, because he was not the brightest in either one, or really.
That's fine.
That's
fine.
fine. It's good.
It's fine. You're morosexual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hardly.
Punching. I'm gonna don't hand.
Killer's Return. Which is
Jason.
Jason.
That's what his whole fucking thing.
And they don't even really have to return as long as it's set up for a return.
Right.
That's the important thing, is the setup. But then usually they do return.
Right. Like, so the ones I think about most are like the ones that have the multiple sequels. So
Yeah.
Jason, Freddy, others. You know the ones.
Oh, I know. Jason's a really good one also because it sets up immediately. I guess part of it is because he wasn't the killer, but like when that hand comes out of the lake at the end of Friday the 13th, it's like, what?
What is that?
That was like one of the best sequel setups of all time. Probably.
The
One
equivalent of a Marvel teaser.
The worst ones is that one time in Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, where Freddy was a car.
Oh. Friday the 13th is a movie series that exists, my dude. What hill are you willing to die on?
Think about that one.
Freddy?
Car Freddy. Yeah. I can't get over that.
Oh.
Anyway.
Good series.
Splitting Up.
Let's split up, gang. I'm back to Scooby-Doo.
I was watching, Save Yourself.
Yeah.
And it was a fun thing, because these girls are at a rest stop, and the driver stops while everyone else in the car is sleeping to go to the bathroom, and she's abducted. So these 4 girls wake up in the car, and there's no driver, so they've like already split up. But then they're like, well, we need to go get help. We need to see if we can find our friend, or if we can find someone who has a phone, because there was no cell coverage.
Of course.
So they're like, 3 of us will walk this way, and 1 of us will stay to make sure she doesn't come back to the car. And the one girl, because they had come back from a horror convention, and the one girl was like, I've never written a script where splitting up was a good idea. And it's like, fun meta horror joke, and then they split up anyway.
Oh my god.
I was like, ooh. Bad.
Oh. Yeah, that's a big one, as it turns out. Because it just makes it easier for the writers to pick people off.
Yeah.
As it turns out. Sometimes it's gotta be tropey to get the scares.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the final girl is like our last big roundabout trope.
So how does that shake out?
There's always a pretty girl who makes it.
Yeah, that's
pretty much
true.
Is what that comes down to. There's always like one usually female protagonist who's able to tough it out of the group, or in smaller, like one-on-one scenarios, usually there's like one girl that makes it still.
Right.
And that is one of my like all-time favorite horror tropes, because it's one that we see in the different subgenres displayed in like a variety of ways.
Right.
And I think in the redneck subgenre, there's always like, I really like it because there's always like that one, she's always a liberal.
Yeah.
There's always like one liberal girl in a group of conservatives who ends up going like gun crazy at the end, because she's like, I can defend myself against the rednecks with this gun. Like, that's always how that happens.
Yeah.
But then, if you look at like the revenge thing, there's always like, she was the one person who tried to make the bullying or whatever less severe,
Right. the one
And
person.
she always makes it out. And, like, you can identify the final girl pretty easy, because there are different...
Usually it's pretty obvious who the best person out of everybody is.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of the times they make it very obvious who the White Knight is going to be.
And it's fun, because every now and then you can, because those very specific tropes are in place, it's fun to mess with people's expectations.
Right.
In that...
Make the nice person.
Kind of scenario.
The villain.
That's good. I had an example, but I don't remember what it was. Anyway. It's a fun thing to do. It's one of my favorite tropes to play with.
Because it's just fun.
Oh, you know, I Saw 2.
Yeah, Amanda.
Is a really good example of that.
As she was the killer the whole time.
Yeah, because you think it's going to be... They set it up very much that she's going to be the final girl, and then she was the accomplice, and you... Like, what?
You're like, there was an accomplice?
Crazy. So yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, and part 3, controversy.
Oh, there's a lot of controversy in the horror genre.
We're here. So here's the thing, is that controversial horror usually ends up being the best horror.
That's true.
Horror, more than any other genre, I would say, to kind of embrace controversies.
Mm-hmm.
There are ways to go about that tactfully and do that to the best of your ability,
right.
But
don't be an asshole.
Chances are you're probably gonna need to push some buttons.
Right.
That's gonna happen.
Well, it's, so a great example of is Get Out.
Yeah.
Because the whole premise is, black guy meets, girlfriend's white family, and they're a bunch of weird, racist, they're fucks.
Yeah.
That are super racist. And, as it turns out, people got offended by that, but, like...
But they're not racist.
But,
they appreciate the body of the black man
okay.
so much.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I really... Get Out did a lot of things very well. I did not understand the motivation at all. Or the, like, I understand that you have to have, like, a fake justification for your motivation for villains to be three-dimensional, but I did not understand the train of logic that led to that decision.
Right. It was like, wait, what? But yeah, as it turns out, Get Out pushed several buttons.
Yeah.
And it got rewarded for it as one of the top-rated horror movies in a long fucking time.
Oh, yeah. And this is something that I kind of wanted to talk about. Also, Stephen King is a guy.
Yes, he is. That's true.
Stephen King, I really just admire. Sometimes one of my favorite things is because he is very open about his process for writing stuff, and it gives you someone to relate to and look up to as a creator, I think, sometimes. Because one thing that he's pretty good about is trying to include people in his writing. And it's something, if you just watch Stephen King movies, you would not get that impression, I feel like.
That's fair.
But it's something that he does really try to do, and he tries to speak out for marginalized communities. And one thing that I really like is because Stephen King will do something, he'll have a character who's from, like, an underrepresented group in the horror genre, and then a bunch of white people will get offended because it's racist, because of how he was portraying someone, and they get into the whole thing where they take a bunch of quotes out of context to make it look as bad as they possibly can, and...
Oh, it's a Tumblr of itself.
He'll get back on and be like, actually, and it's one of those things, Stephen King is not perfect, and his representation of marginalized groups is not perfect, but he goes about it in a way that you can kind of appreciate.
Yeah.
Because you can see what he's trying to do and where he's grown
Right.
in these. One thing that
He's trying, and he's trying to do it respectfully.
Right. One thing that you see, a lot of people got kind of upset about The Stand because there was a black character in there called Mother Abigail, who, she was a great character. She was like a great person. She was the best person probably in the book, but she had psychic powers, and the way that a lot of people spun that was that like black people are only good if they have like psychic powers or whatever it was, and they like tried to and it is kind of a horror trope where you have like the omniscient black person. So it did kind of fall into that whole group, but it got spun so wildly out of context, you know, and it was one of those things where, you know, it could have been done better, but that really wasn't the takeaway from Mother Abigail.
Right.
And
hold on.
He gets into it a lot whenever he writes for gay characters. Also, he's always in some kind of controversy.
Of course.
Trying to portray gay people, and everyone's like, you're not gay, leave it alone. And it's like...
Well, you're leaving... Hold on.
It's kind of a no-win situation, and it's really tricky with horror, especially because when you have things like The Stand, where everyone is getting killed off by like the millions,
right?
Or even when like a small group is being terrorized, it's like you're not really treating any of your characters well. And just because representation is so low, there's going to be a lot of attention on any minorities that you have in your story, and it's not always going to be a positive thing.
I think it's one of those things where because certain groups are so underrepresented, when there is representation, it gets placed under like impossible scrutiny.
Right.
And it's really annoying because I'm like, maybe I just like. Want like a gay character. It's just like there though.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't have to be a big deal. I thought that's what we wanted though.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's just one of those things.
I think it's also pretty hard on the horror genre in particular because killing is indiscriminate in the horror genre. That's a big part of it. But the thing is, in other media, killing your gays is a trope that is consistently used.
Yeah.
And that's bad. So it's like, because it's an established trope in other genres, people give it a hard side eye. Even though, you know, everyone's getting killed in the horror genre.
That was one of like my all-time favorite Stephen King controversies to read about.
Yeah.
Because people got really mad that the gay guy died in it. And it's like, it was a flashback from an era where everyone died, you guys.
Yeah, like, guys, everyone is dead. You have to know.
But yeah, that's kind of a difficult thing. And then there's also, you know, when you get into any kind of, political horror is one of my favorite subgenres of horror, but it gets into a lot of really dicey areas like that, you know? When you have any kind of politically motivated killings, especially.
Ooh. Max does not give a shit about that.
Yeah. Max is probably one of the big ones right now, because he does a lot of stuff. I think one of my... I think my favorite political horror from Max really does have to be the anti-vax stuff that he writes. It's very disturbing stuff.
Yeah, it's very bad. I think his responses to it are great too, because people are like, "Don't shove your politics down my throat," and it's like, "Don't read my political pieces." If you don't like my politics. These are written to be political pieces. I'm not shoving an agenda into something else. This is specifically about that.
Yeah. Cult got really political, which I was very impressed by.
Huh.
Because I did not really think that they'd have the guts
To do it,
to tackle it as head on as they did.
and then they just did.
And they went for it. They committed. And I was very impressed. It's one of the reasons why I like the season so much, because I think that it really paid off. There's Joe Hill wrote a story recently in his last novella collection about gun control that was just absolutely horrific. And I think that's one of and what all of these things have in common is these are all because political horror, it's one of those things where horror is sort of, generally horror is fantasy. It's supposed to be very escapist, like
Right.
speculative fiction is traditionally. Political horror is definitely a more direct reflection of things that scare us in society.
Right. There's very little metaphor about it.
And that's something that, because of the world we live in, that's something that is a lot scarier to me. The things that usually hit home the hardest and make me the most uncomfortable are the political horror pieces. It's why Cult is my new favorite season of American Horror Story.
You want to hear a political horror story?
Yeah.
I got a presidential alert.
Oh, fuck.
God, I hated it. That's the story.
That was bad.
Yeah, it was bad. Fuck off. I'll block you.
Fuck, I'm trying so hard not to make it a political thing right here at the end of the podcast, but, like, the fucking Kavanaugh thing, I feel like, all of my news channels have turned into political horror pieces.
Right, and it's like, are you fucking serious right now? Yeah.
I feel like if these, like, comedy shows were being leaked through to the good timeline, they would see them as political horror pieces.
Right. God, I wish we were in the good timeline. This is the bad place.
This is the bad place.
But yeah, as it turns out, because I think one of those things, I don't know for sure, because I don't, I'm not in. It seems like the horror community generally is a little bit more liberal.
Oh, yeah, I would say.
Like, because, I mean, the whole thing is you're reflecting fears of humanity, which means recognizing fears of humanity, which equals fucked up shit.
Yeah.
Not
to say anything bad about conservatives, but I do think that it's one of those, like our opening quote, because horror is a very sympathetic emotion.
Right. You have to be able to relate on some level to be really scared.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That checks out.
There are some things, like, I've said this before, I do think there are some issues that should be tackled by people in the community and probably not people outside of it. Like, just because, I mean, I would prefer to hear the marginalized voices stop talking about their experience, but I mean, like, I'm never gonna say no to respectful representation.
Here's something that I kind of go through, is that there's a disconnect in between the world that I want to live in and the world that I do live in. Right. And it's something that I go through a lot, like, it's something that I started thinking about in these kinds of terms, actually because of trans representation, which isn't really how I see it in horror fiction, but it's one of those things where it's just like, it would be really nice if we... It would be, like, really nice if we lived in a world where everyone had enough representation in the media that anyone could write a diverse group of cast, like a diverse group of characters, and not have them put under this level of scrutiny. But we don't live in that world. So It's like, taking the steps to get there, like, the smoothest transition would be, like, if more people did content from those groups and we started there, but the thing about that is that if you don't ever take those chances, you're also going to be put on the line for not having diverse characters, and like as long as you're doing it respectfully, the thing about it is that you are going to have someone's going to have to be the first one to start paving those things.
Right, exactly.
And like even if people are upset with you because they're not that's not like who they wanted to start paving those things, eventually more people are going to start writing those things when they see it's okay.
Right. I mean, obviously, I think one of the things is you gotta be aware of what you're writing, and you gotta read the fucking room, and go from there.
Do some research.
Oh, please do research. I'm begging you. Talk to somebody.
If you're doing some folklore from a country,
are you okay, Kat?
make sure it's the right country.
Are you sad about...
I'm sad.
about...
It's such an easy thing to avoid. The internet exists.
That's true.
Anyway.
But yeah, and you can talk to people. People also exist. I highly recommend, like, doing that instead of assuming what people are like. Because people will know.
Yeah.
That you don't know how people are. It's obvious.
It's very true.
But yeah. I think one of the big things about working in the horror genre is you gotta start controversy. That's just the way the genre is.
Yeah.
Like...
And it's going to seem really bad in some instances at first, but so did most of the horror masters, you know?
Right.
Like we were talking, Last House on the Left was like, it spawned so many different facets of the horror genre that we know today. And people were mad when it came out. Like, people were furious at Last House on the Left. Like, you had people walking out of The Exorcist.
Yeah. I think one of the things that a lot of great horror has in common is it upsets people.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, that's sort of part of what it's meant to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anything else?
No, I think that's it.
Think that about...
Do some spooky stuff, guys.
Do some spooks. It's the month
spooky
of spooks.
season.
Go get some pumpkin spice and...
and read a troubling story about pumpkin spice.
Oh, that's my least favorite unsettling story. I had to go to work after I read that.
Nice.
But yeah, so that's it. This has been Unsolicited Advice. I'm Bubblegum.
I'm Toxic.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye.